Mitch, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I'm great. Hey, thank you for coming, man. I appreciate it.
Of course.
You are the salmon and energy expert for the Idaho Conservation League, which I have a great appreciation for. One of my first crazy podcasts was with Brian Brooks.
Oh, yeah.
It was episode, I don't know, like 25 or something. Sure. Back in that, I think it was still in 22.
Yeah.
Anyway, he came in because Representative Simpson had done something with proposing breaching the dams back in 22.
Right.
And he had posted something on Instagram. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who Idaho Wildlife Federation was at the time. Sure. But I was like, hey, man, do you want to come in and talk about this? He took me through like this 2-hour journey of, what did he call it? The Gregorian knot of Bonneville Power.
Oh, yeah.
The dams,
yeah,
salmon, and the most expensive species rescue operation in the history of the world. It's something like
$26 billion in counting.
Yes. $900-ish million annually to try to save the salmon.
Yep.
And we have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Which is wild times. I recently had Norm Semenko in, who's a former, I believe, executive director of the Idaho Water Users Association. He had some things to say. You saw that episode, reached out, and man, talk to me about it. Salmon and Energy in Idaho, go.
Yeah, sure. So we used to have at least 1 million, probably more like 2 or 3 million salmon and steelhead, these anadromous fish coming back here to Idaho every single year. And those benefited tribes. They benefited people, Europeans who came here and settled here as well. And that was the wealth of not just Idaho, but of the entire region, right? The wealth of this region, what makes the Pacific Northwest special, at least in my view, is rivers and the fish that run through them. And after all of that, after people enjoyed sustainable harvest of those fish, people started taking too much. People started changing the ecosystem where those fish lived. And so that meant habitat degradation, that meant, mining, timber harvest, again, over harvest of fish, people taking too many for canneries and stuff like that. And so all of those things gradually took away from the number of salmon that we have coming back to the state every single year. The coup de grace of all of that was the hydro building era that happened in, the 1920s through the 1960s or 70s. And we vastly developed the rivers here in the Northwest with these hydroelectric or storage dams that are on the Columbia, on the Snake, on all the tributaries of those things. And so those dams collectively either blocked 50% of the habitat where those salmon and steelhead used to run. So think of things like the Hells Canyon Complex, Grand Coulee Dam, the Upper Deschutes River, the Upper Yakima River, a few other places like that. And where they didn't block them, they had significant impacts on how safely salmon can get through them, right? And so what we saw was that 2 to 3 million fish in Idaho, 10 to 16 million fish all across the Columbia Basin went down to less than 1 million fish total by the time even 1937 came around. By the time, and to Norm's point, he was correct in saying this. In 1937, which is about when Bonneville Dam was constructed down near Portland, that was sort of the first major dam across the Columbia, we did sort of have this, we hit this bottom of how many fish are coming back to the region in general. What Norm didn't say is that those were all wild fish at that point. There weren't very many hatcheries in that time. And so, yes, the total number of fish has gone up since 1937, but that is by virtue of building this multi-million, billion-dollar complex of hatcheries that now put out all these fish. Those didn't exist back in 1937.
Okay, wait. When you said things have come back since 1937, what do you mean?
Sure. So if you look at just the total number of fish that were coming back to Bonneville Dam, where you can actually count all the fish going by a single place, that number has gone up. If you look at just the single point, Bonneville Dam, total number of fish, doesn't matter what kind of fish they are, since 1937.
Okay, so they were almost extinct in 37.
Yes. Driven to extinction by all those factors that I talked about. I mean, all the habitat factors, all the over harvest, and dams that existed by then as well.
Okay, so back up. So when did they use? It was like mid 1800s, 1870.
Yeah, I mean, people started arriving here. Lewis and Clark, 1804, 1805, right?
Sure, and then the industrial dam mechanism started going in.
Industrial things that started to impact salmon in a significant way started in the mid to late 1800s.
Okay, great.
Those things continue till today, I will say, in many cases.
So in that roughly, let's say 1880 to let's say 1840, okay, you had a 60-year time frame where you went from millions of fish returning up these rivers down to almost no fish at all.
Yep.
So in just one lifetime, or less than
one human lifetime, to be clear. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then in roughly 1940, people said, hey, I mean, obviously you have tribes,
Yeah.
you have individuals in industry, you have all kinds, and they're like, hey man, this is crazy. Like we can't, they're almost gone.
Right.
Like that's it. So there was an effort then in, the 1940 timeframe. It's like, okay, what could we do to support the repopulation of the species, either through removing impositions to their survival, augmenting or supplementing their existence with hatcheries and things of that nature. And that started the long slog, the 85-year slog from roughly 1940 to today.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have more salmon at the Bonneville Dam now than we did 85 years ago, but we're talking like a few thousand.
I would say, like, of course we have more fish there now. We have more hatcheries producing more fish. We have more smolts in the river now than we did back then. And so even if none of the conditions change, you're getting more of those fish back as adults because you're starting with more, right? If we think about throwing all of these young fish into the system, they're coming back at, less than 1% rate. Obviously, if you throw more fish into it, you're going to get a few more back. But we've also spent, billions of dollars trying to alleviate different parts of the system by restoring habitat, building these hatcheries, controlling harvest, controlling predators. And none of that has really created the results for wild fish in particular that we want to see, right? We have, in Idaho especially, we have some of the wildest fish you can think of. I mean, you go to a place like the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, or some of its tributaries, there are no hatcheries there. There's no harvest there either, really. And so, you have sort of this perfect picture of what salmon look like when they have really good habitat and none of these other influences. The only influence that has continued through that time is the hydro system. And those populations are in the tank, right? I mean, we had two or three reds, these salmon nests, in the main stem, the Middle Fork of the Salmon last year.
Wait, back up. 2 or 3 salmon nests. Is that an area where a bulk of salmon, like a bunch of salmon come together?
It's not a bulk. It's 2. It's one female digging a nest. So 2 or 3 reds means you have 2 or 3 females in the entire main stem of the Middle Fork salmon.
Wait, how do you like? Do you have a drone that goes over this? Is like, oh, there's one.
Yeah. So actually, this guy I know, this friend of mine named Russ Thoreau, who used to work for the Forest Service. He's retired now. And he
Uncle's
started
name Henry.
Sorry?
Uncle's name Henry. Just kidding. Come on.
That's
Come
fine.
on.
I get it. Spelled differently, though.
Okay.
Fair enough. Good joke. Russ started these overflights of the Middle Fork and all of its tributaries back in, I think, the 1980s or 1990s to count every single one of the reds that exists anywhere in the Middle Fork drainage. And, there's more reds on some of the tributaries like Loon Creek, like Camas Creek, but in that main stem area, there used to be a lot more. And he estimates that, I think just based on density of how many reds you could fit in that area, that there could have been at one point 50,000 salmon in the Middle Fork system. And now we've gone down to, I think it's, certainly less than 1,000 fish coming back there every year.
Okay, let's flush this out a little bit.
Sure.
So the idea in the 1940s is let's improve the man-made conditions that have obviously had a damaging effect on these fish hatcheries and the fish returning. Okay. And let's add in our own hatcheries, man-made hatcheries. And that's how we're going to bring the fish back. And although we have increased the number to not many, right? Like we're under 10,000 fish a year, correct?
We're under 10,000 wild fish a year here in the state of Idaho. It's probably, the numbers vary a little bit, but it's probably between 10 and 20,000 hatchery fish in addition to those. But for Endangered Species Act related purposes, for recovery of what we in the state of Idaho and everybody in the region wants, we really care about those wild fish. Those are the ones that matter. Those are the ones that contribute to the environment, right? Hatchery fish are all either getting caught or they're going back to a hatchery system, and they're not putting their nutrients, their genetics, their bodies back into the system in a way that matters for bears, eagles, other fish, whatever you can think of that might eat a fish or might somehow take up those marine derived nutrients. Just like, to me, think about this as like it's a big conveyor belt, right? Like, you go from these high granite lakes in Idaho where there's not a whole lot of nutrient density going on. You send these little baby fish that are 5-6 inches long out to the ocean. They come back a few years later, they get big. Back in the day, we're talking 5-6 foot long Chinook coming back. And they put all of that back into the ecosystem. And so you find those genetics in bears and eagles, in trees. You see salmon DNA in pine and fir trees that are along the Middle Fork of the Salmon River. And that is what's feeding this ecosystem. And because of that massive decline from, like I said, 2 or 3 million fish to less than 1% of that, you don't see that anymore. And that's why those fish are the ones that matter.
So this nutrient, essentially artery, coming from, like, if you just imagine like scooping up a bunch of nutrients from the ocean over a period of years and then just dropping it in. It's like, if you could mechanically do that, you need helicopters and whatever, whatever nonsense you can imagine.
Sure.
But the fish just naturally do it, which allowed other species to thrive, and not just carnivores, obviously, because there's a classic image of, like the bear snatching the salmon, but then it goes and feeds all of the plant and wildlife. Like, it's just a nutrient pipeline. That's what you're essentially fire hosing nutrients using the salmon as the body transport.
And you have this ecosystem that's developed around that pipeline for tens of thousands of years. And if that's gone in the space of 60 years, to your point, that doesn't look very good. And that's a very rapid change for a place like Idaho. And I think that's contributed to some of our problems with forest health here in the state too. So that means things like wildfire, that means bark beetles have more of an effect. It flows through all of these different species that all in the end depend on this keystone species of salmon and steelhead.
Okay. So bottom line is salmon here's a question for you. How do you know, once the fish go out, so you have hatchery fish and you have wild fish,
sure,
right? All the smelt go out, right?
Smelt, different things. Yeah.
Can I smelt him? Gold member from
Right.
Austin Powers. That's kind of my thing. No, you weirdo. Anyway,
Smelt's also a fish. Delta smelt.
Damn it, man! You're screwing me all up.
Hey, man.
Okay. Anyway, smelt him. Smolt. Okay.
Smolt him.
So the smolt goes out. And you have, let's say, 10,000, or let's say wild and hatchery. Okay. When they come back, is there any way to determine which were wild and which were hatchery?
Yeah.
Okay.
So hatchery fish have an adipose fin on the back of the fish, and that gets clipped when they leave the hatchery. So every smolt that they put into the river, they clip the adipose fin.
What, like literally one by one? There's like...
Yeah, there's machines that do this, I think. I'm no hatchery expert.
Dude, that's crazy.
But yeah, they do it for millions of smolts before they put them in. And then when they come back, that fin is still, 99.9% of the time gone. And they can sort of see, oh yeah, that's a ad fin clipped fish. So it's a hatchery fish.
Perhaps I misunderstood Norm, but I thought he was saying that there's like, how do you know which fish? He's like, they're all wild fish once they come back from the ocean.
Well, that's just not true, right? Okay. Like, we're talking about fish that came from fundamentally different places that grew up different ways that are going back to different places too, right?
With different gene makeup.
And that's really important because, hatchery fish are not the same as wild fish. And we've actually seen that hatchery fish and wild fish, when they mix too closely, when you have hatchery fish and wild fish breeding with each other, that's bad for the wild fish genetics that are still pretty diverse in a lot of these populations. And that's the magic that we still have here in Idaho, is that we have these populations of just wild fish, or almost entirely just wild fish. That's middle fork salmon, again, the classic example.
So there's something that can't be replaced with hatchery fish, which is a genetic profile and, more than anything, a destination. Like, if you have a homing pigeon and it's homing in on the wrong place, you're like, no, we got to get it to go, north, and it's going south. However you're doing it, that's the whole nature of, like, wherever this salmon was born or hatched. Yeah. It's going to tend back towards that thing. Well, if that target is not where we need the nutrients and that's not where we need the salmon population, then it's like, then there's always an inherent problem with hatchery fish, because unless you can get the hatcheries wherever you want every single time, which is a difficult pull.
The other thing that's crazy to me about Idaho fish is that these fish do the longest, highest migration of any fish population, basically anywhere in the world. There's a couple up in Alaska that do go slightly longer, but not nearly as high. So these fish are going 900 miles from the ocean and more than a mile up in elevation from the Pacific up to, like, Redfish Lake up near Stanley, right? And so what that means is that this is, it's not just something that's important to Idaho, but we can use these fish actually to restore fish other places too, right? So, like, let's say that climate change is a big deal for salmon, right? And at these lower elevations where water temperatures are going to heat up a lot, salmon might not survive, or might not survive super well in some places through those effects. We can use these fish from Idaho to restore fish into those places. This is our bank of fish that are coming back to the best habitat possible, the best climate refuge possible, anywhere in the lower 48 states. And if salmon disappear elsewhere, we can use these fish to bring them back in those places. You can't do the inverse. Fish from those places cannot go 900 miles and more than a mile up in elevation to repopulate Idaho. They are not capable. Like, they have not evolved to do that. And so We need.
So we have like superfish.
We have superfish. We have mountaineers and marathon runners of the fish world, and they are capable of going anywhere that we want them to, right? As long as we introduce them into that place in a good way once the fish there are already gone. We can use the amazing diversity and strength these fish have to do that. We definitely can't do that the other way around. So if we lose these fish in Idaho, they're gone.
Man, this is a very odd parallel, but I'm Mexican. Okay, you wouldn't know, but I actually am. Sure. I just happen to be tall, and I shave a lot, so it's like no mustache. Anyway, but I am so good with hot temperatures. Like, you want to put me out somewhere at 100 degrees, and say like go run. Yeah, I can go run. Like, it's no problem. My joints feel good, everything. My wife is Irish, and she, like, you put her out somewhere hot, she gets heat rash, like all these different things, and I'm doing a lot of work on my backyard, and I've been doing it over the last week. Things got hot, and it's really amazing to see the difference in our just genetic systems, because I can be out there head to toe, like boots on, long sleeve hoodie on, 100 degrees, just shoveling gravel. And like, yeah, I'm uncomfortable, but I can do it. Whereas, my wife and kids just wilt. They're like, can't. So, I mean, that is something that I've noticed about, my wife is a savage athlete. It's not that she's like some weak woman. It's just genetically, she cannot handle those types of things. Whereas I can. And you look at any of the, you know what I'm going to do in July? This is going to be wild. I'm going to go dethassel corn in Marsing.
Okay. Fun.
Because I don't know if it's going to be fun.
I don't know about fun. I mean, interesting.
It's going to be, well, look, here's the thing. People talk about, hey, why don't we just get fewer immigrant laborers and more native, more U.S. population working our ag land? It's like, I've been told, they're like, listen, these guys start at 5, which is fine. I can get up early. They put on full rain slicks because you're walking through cornfields the whole time and your skin's getting cut up, right? It's like, so you got the full thing on and it's wet, so it's very humid. Okay, he's like, so full rain slicks, like rubbery stuff, and it gets up to like 110 in the cornfield, because again, like if it's 100, just like, so it's like you're in Florida. It's like, and you go out there for like 10 hours a day, just dethassling corn. Yeah. And I want to go experience that. Like, I want to go see what kind of fresh hell that is. And go, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. I was talking to the guy who's in charge of Marsing ag labor, and he's like, listen, man, it's going to be a lot. And he's totally in. He's like, he's like, they're slamming salt, they're slamming water, they go home, they don't do anything. They essentially hydrate, go right back to bed. He's like, when you're in that time frame, it's go time, and you have one task, and it's to survive out there day in and day out. And you got to do everything to that end.
So you sound like you're going to be a bit like a hatchery fish going out there in the Columbia or out in the ocean, who's been raised in a concrete tank, getting fed at regular meal times every single day, experiencing all the comfort in the world. And then you get plopped into this environment where there's predators, there's things that want to eat you, there's people that might want to catch you later on in your life, there's the ocean, which, good Lord, like, there's all kinds of things going on out there that might want to hurt you in some way. You got to go over 800-foot cliffs on your way out to that ocean. If you're coming from Idaho all the way, all these things are going to hurt you. And so, you being the coddled, little young smolt in this case that you are, you're getting 3 square meals a day, and all of a sudden you're not eating for a few days, right? And so how are you going to survive versus the kid that grew up at 5 years old working in the cornfield, the wild fish in this case, that had to grow up fighting every single day for whatever they're going to eat, trying to escape every predator they can? They're hardened by the time they're getting ready for this migration out to the ocean, right? And so they can make that a lot more successfully and make the journey back a lot more successfully than hatchery fish can.
Life is hard.
Life is hard.
Life is hard.
Life is especially hard for a hatchery fish, at least for most of its life, and also hard for wild fish too, because they face some of the same stressors.
Yeah, at least they're not praying mantises. Anyway, so we have all of these problems, which begs the question, for what? Right? Because ultimately, when I first spoke with Brian, and he was explaining not all these, but a lot of these things, he's like, here's the problem. I'm like, wait, why don't we just resolve this problem? And he's like, because of power. Right. That was one of he's like, power and transportation. I'm pretty sure the rest of the world gets power and transportation. He's like, yeah, man, but it's a train wreck. The power that is produced by the lower 4 Snake River dams. Talk to me about this power system, because it's my limited understanding that yes, we need power 1,000%. And yes, we need more power 1,000%. We need cheaper. We need more. We need better. We need more reliable. All of those things 100%. Right. And more specifically, I'm worried about power in Idaho. I want the cheapest, most available, most consistent power that we could possibly get. Right. The power produced by these dams, it's my understanding, does not actually benefit Idaho in these ways. Meaning the dams produce there's a word for them. It's like run of the day, right? Like they
run a river.
They don't store water, right? You don't have this like 100-foot wall where all the water is stored and then they drain it down as they need it, right? Because that water storage is like a giant battery, right? We can let some out, we can pinch it off, and it'll just spin the turbines. This is run of river, which means whenever the snow's melting, whenever the rivers are high, that's when the electricity is being produced.
Yeah.
Now, in April, when we're getting the highest electrical production out of these dams, we are not consuming enough electricity to even consume this. Right. So we end up, because we're producing this electricity, we sell this electricity at a loss to other states. So Idaho taxpayers are subsidizing this electrical generation mechanism with their tax dollars because it doesn't even cover its own cost. And then when we're using the most electricity in the end of July and August, these dams are not producing a ton of electricity. They're producing very minimal. And so then we have to get electricity from elsewhere. So if we want abundant, consistent, cheap electricity, it does not appear that these dams are providing abundant, cheap, and consistent electricity for Idaho when Idaho needs it.
Yeah. I would add a couple other things there.
Great.
Because you made a lot of my point for me. Thanks for doing that.
Okay, but is that accurate?
You're spot on.
Because I don't know anything about this.
We in the Northwest built a lot of hydro dams, like I talked about before.
And this was done in like the late 1800s, early 1900s.
First dam across the Columbia went in sometime in the 1920s. Rock Island, right outside of Wenatchee. Okay. Last dam, major dam that was built, I think was Dworshak sometime in the 70s, maybe early 80s, if I have my time right. And that's the...
Wasn't the Teton the last one they built because that one broke?
That's probably right. That's further, that's not salmon habitat.
Okay,
that's
sorry.
Further upstream. So it's, I think about that, but yeah, that dam doesn't exist anymore because it broke. And so, we built all these dams. Those now provide something like 60, maybe 70% of all of the power needs that we have here in the Northwest. And 90% of what Bonneville Power, this big federal agency that controls all these dams, 90% of what they provide out to the region.
Okay, so wait, back up. So these dams that were built throughout the 1900s.
All these federal dams. They do provide us with the bulk of the power we need, well over 3/4 of the power. Okay, great. But it's important to remember like where those come from, right? So like Grand Coulee Dam is, it's the Rock of Ages. It is one of these big like storage reservoirs that you're talking about that holds, millions of acre feet of water behind it that can be released throughout the course of the year. There's a couple of other dams like that here in the region, but for the most part, we do have these run-of-river hydro projects that do not store much water.
So a dam is not a dam. It depends on what type of dam and what the utilization is.
All dams aren't the same. That's what I would say. So some storage dams are useful because they are these big batteries that sort of regardless of what's happening with hydrology over the course of a year, they might be able to store enough water from the year before. There might be, different times where they have the ability to keep that fuel around. Think about it as just a fuel source, right? These other dams don't have the ability to keep a fuel source. It's more like it's like a natural gas plant where you have a pipeline going to it. You can't store a bunch of natural gas there, right? And so if that pipeline breaks, if that water source depletes in some way, there's not much fuel there. And they are very dependent on that seasonal cycle of when water's coming down, to your point, right? Spring is when most of the water's coming down, also the period of least demand here in the region, because if you think about it, that's when people aren't running heaters. That's when people aren't running AC units. That's also when the rest of the hydro system, all the other dams, not the 4 Lower Snake River dams, are producing their most power as well.
Okay, so to say these two things can be true. Hydroelectric provides Idaho with an enormous amount of its electricity needs.
Of course.
And not every dam that produces hydroelectricity is necessarily valuable or part of the bulk of that production. So that's the difference. When people are like, we need hydroelectric, it's like, yeah, that's true.
Totally.
Do you need that dam?
Right.
Like, how is that dam right there, that specific one serving you?
And I hear that all the time. People say, oh, well, the hydro system, we need hydro. Northwest runs on hydro, I think is somebody's motto out there. And I don't disagree. We've built a lot of hydro dams here, and they're very important for the future of our energy system. That doesn't mean that we need all of them. Right. And we've already seen some dams come out on the Klamath down in Southern Oregon, Northern California. The Elwha dams up on the Olympic Peninsula, they've already come out. Those were small hydro producers, but still they were part of this hydro system that is really important, but you can take pieces away from that. The other point I want to get to on this is that we have this huge dependence on hydro here in the Northwest, and that's really fragile right now because of the effects of climate change happening, right?
Can you say that? Can you say climate change?
I can say
okay.
change.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
of course.
Just getting
Is
my hands are sweating now.
Are we not supposed to say climate change anymore?
They're going to take us off.
Okay.
It's all right. Keep going.
Global war? I don't know.
Don't say that. Oh my God. I almost spat out my coffee. Don't say that. Don't say that word. Anyway, okay. So bottom line is like, and I've talked to a lot of,
let me get back.
A lot of ag people. It's like there is one person was telling me, he's like, listen, man, and he lives way over in East Idaho. He's like, there's a large, I don't know if it's a mountain, but like a large range or hill area. He's like, there used to be snow on it at the base of it year round. Right. He's like, now it's gone by August. Right. He's like, so that's it. He's like, I don't know what to tell you. When I was a kid, you could see snow there all year round. Now you can't. Right. And he's like, there's something changing. Right.
And so the climate change picture for the Northwest is really interesting because most models say we're actually not going to see a decrease in overall precipitation here in the Northwest. It might even increase in certain places, but it's the form of that precipitation that's really important, right? To this guy's point, we used to get a lot of snow here. We still get a lot of snow here. Don't get me wrong, but we're getting less and less every single year. And more of that is falling as rain instead. And so you get these big rain on snow events, first off, that are bad. And that just makes a lot of, snowmelt happen all at once and goes into the river. But it's moving the entire hydrograph of these big rivers earlier in the year, right? You get this precipitation that is coming into the rivers as water, not locked up as snow till it's later in the summer. And so what you get is that spring freshet, that big rush of water coming down in March, April, May is bigger. So we're getting more power out of the dams at exactly the time we don't need it, and less power in summertime when we do need it most. And that's a growing load here in the region as just weather gets hotter late in summer too.
Right. And from an agricultural standpoint, that's also problematic because you want to be able to have irrigation, controlled irrigation and water management all throughout the growing season, which is why they're trying to get recharge sites and injection wells lined up because they're like, listen, if more of it comes earlier in the year, we cannot afford to just let, 1 million acre feet flow down uncaught. Like we got to figure out ways to catch this stuff and recharge all the aquifers as much as, because it's like an underground water bottle. Right. And then we just squeeze it out and use it as we need.
Yeah. And that's adapting, right? That's changing the circumstances of what we have to match the future conditions that we're going to get. And so, again, we have this system that is so dependent on hydro, and we need to diversify. We need to, think of it like investing in stocks, right? You don't put all your money in one basket. You put it in a bunch of different baskets and see which, the net result will be better than just the risk that you take on by putting it all in one basket. We've been putting all of our eggs into the hydro basket here in the Northwest for a long time, and that's worked okay so far. But when you're presented with a situation where the hydrograph is changing, where conditions are changing, where we have this growing load too, you got to do something different, right? And so that's what I think is we have to move away from particularly these low benefit run of river dams that are really dependent on the hydrograph that can't store a whole lot of water, and move into different forms of generation that are actually more reliable when you think about it that way than what hydro gives us right now.
Nuclear. Anyway, so as a conservation person, what do you think about nuclear? I was just down at INL a couple weeks ago. It was wild times, man.
We don't have any strong stance on nuclear. I think we've seen nuclear done well. I think we've seen nuclear done remarkably not well.
How many people, like if you ask somebody for, I don't know, like a bad car accident. Have you ever seen a bad car accident? Sure. Yeah. Everybody's driven past. Everybody rubbernecks. You shouldn't do it, but you do.
Does that mean you're not going to drive anymore?
No. Well, that's not.
Is that your point? Oh.
No, I'm not actually getting at that. What I think is interesting is nobody actually knows, like they know of a bad car accident. Nobody actually knows of a nuclear accident. There are literally like 3. And everybody knows of these 3, but like when we say like, well, we've all seen nuclear done. No, we haven't. It's like, it's like, okay, there were 2 world wars too. Like we all know about these things. So my point is that these are notable events that people feel like they're connected to in some way. And then that gives them some reference point to this thing. It's like, you don't know anything about it, right? Like we don't, like how many people have died from nuclear meltdowns? It's like a handful. Like it's not like a bomb going off, right? Like these are not, anyway, I'm not like a champion for nuclear or anything. I'm just saying, I think it's interesting. The more I've thought about it, it's like, why do people, you know what it's like? It's almost like people's views on elections in the state of Idaho. There's been a long period of time for the last like 5 years where people have been very leery of the election system here. And it's like, why? You ever had a bad experience? And overwhelmingly, there's a sentiment that elections in the broader sense are problematic, but nobody has any empirical evidence for that. That's just their stance.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you know, it was a problem in some other state. It's like, okay, but here right now, would you walk down the street and tell everybody that you believe Idaho elections are solid?
Right.
And they're like, well, I don't know. It's like, why wouldn't you? You have no knowledge to the contrary.
Right.
You know, so again, it's kind of like these large notable events make people feel like they have a rock solid position. But my question on nuclear more specifically is if we supplied an abundant, consistent source of energy, that would take pressure off of the necessity for the lower efficiency dams that we're subsidizing, you know, because they don't cover themselves.
Sure. Yeah. I just, the only thing I'll say about nuclear, because I'm no expert on nuclear necessarily, is I have yet to see a modern nuclear project, these small modular reactors that INL was trying to host, come out at a cost that people are willing to pay for it. So this project that was out at INL for a while, and I don't actually know its current status, but it was backed by a bunch of these electric cooperatives, some of which are Bonneville's customers, some of which are getting this power from the lower Snake River dams. And, you know, so we were supportive of that. We wanted them to move past, you know, their Bonneville contracts and move beyond hydro into nuclear, right? The project ended up costing too much, even after getting a big grant or forgivable loan from DOE. I forget which case it was, Department of Energy. And all the utilities got out of it. They didn't want to pay what it would cost to develop it and then get the power from it. They weren't willing to do that.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
Wouldn't the exact same argument be made for our existing energy infrastructure?
Sure.
Like if somebody was like, say we don't have the Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, I got an idea. Let's build this thing over here.
Yeah.
People are like, that's not going to pencil out. But we have it. It exists. It's a sunk cost, and now we just use it, right? Like if you looked at the run of river dams in the lower Snake River, right? If those didn't exist, and somebody's like, "Hey, I got an idea. Let's build a dam here. It's going to cost X number of dollars, and it's actually going to cost us money. Believe it or not, that'll be wild. So we're going to build this thing, and then we're going to ask the taxpayers to subsidize it so we can ship energy out of state. How about we do that?" People are like, "That's ridiculous. We're not doing that." So it seems that we have a system of a standard, right? A financial standard and a project standard that's being applied to contemporary projects that our current existing projects don't pass themselves.
Right. We have an incumbency issue, right? It's well known. I think it's well assumed that if anybody tried to build a big hydro project like the Lower Snake Dams or, you know, something else in some other river here in the region, it would never make it. It wouldn't pencil out first off, and people would be opposed to it because of what it would do to salmon, steelhead, river communities that depend on them and tribes that depend on them as well. People aren't willing to take that kind of make that kind of compromise, even for something as important as energy. We have other ways of generating it at this point. It was just back in the day, you could either build a coal plant or you could build a dam. And they chose to build dams instead of coal plants. And, you know, I don't know the costs and benefits on building one or the other, but it certainly impacted salmon and steelhead in this case more than a coal plant would, right?
I went to Winchester recently. I got invited for an event up there, and I actually hit up the Winchester State Park, which was awesome. It's like this super cool little state park with like this little mountain lake, actually man-made. I had no idea. It's like, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a super cool place. But I passed through Riggins, and I'd never been to Riggins, and I cannot say that
center of the universe,
right? Well, if you're a fishing guy,
Wallace makes that claim too, but Riggins is the legitimate center of the universe.
And it's wild because you're driving up there and you're following the river and it's beautiful and gorgeous. I loved every second of it. And you come to Riggins and all of a sudden it's like all of this industry, right? And I don't know, industry is an interesting word, but like you have tons of hotels, you have tons of like this, that, and the other. And you're like, oh my God, this is what Brian was talking about. And he said something like $40 million flows through there when the salmon are running. And he's like, the enormous financial benefit that the salmon bring just to that one little place. And you're in and out of the town in 60 seconds, right? Like you can blink and it's gone. But it is really interesting to see that used to be something even greater, right? Like that used to be a huge boom for people.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, Riggins isn't alone. Why would you go to Orofino in February unless you're going to go catch a steelhead, right? What is the town of Salmon on the Salmon River, I'll note, if there are no more salmon running through either of those places? What is Redfish Lake without redfish, right? Like, it goes beyond economy.
It's a golden bear on a flag. I didn't even know that was a bear. Like, we killed them all. We killed them all like 150 years ago, and it's on our state flag. Yeah. Like, how ridiculous is that?
Yeah. Yeah. It goes beyond economics are important. And, you know, that is the lifeblood, literally. Salmon are the lifeblood, literally, of these different places because of the economics they bring through guiding and outfitting, sure, but also through grocery stores, hotels, gas stations, whatever else you want to name, right? But it's so much more like an icon of the state, too, right? Like, I think it was Tim Egan in one of his books, an author, who said, you know, the Northwest...
I figured he was an author if you said books.
Then, fair enough. The Northwest is...
Boom!
It could be an illustrator, picture book.
Yeah.
That's what I'm reading these days.
He's still being an author.
Who said the Northwest is wherever salmon return. And we are defined by these fish in many ways. And our environments are built on their backs, kind of literally. And our towns are built on their backs, literally. And so that's just important, I think.
When you say it defines the Northwest, it also defines the tribal nations that exist here. I recently had the Coeur d'Alene tribe chairman come in, as well as the Shopai chairman come in. Both incredible guys. I'm really, really happy that I got a chance to talk to them. And they have a like U.S. legal right to fish and water. Right? Like, where are we with that? Because it was my understanding that there was a risk, at least in years recently, that there were court systems that were like, hey man, stop messing around with this, or I'm going to snap my fingers, and they have a legal right to water and they got a legal right to fish. And this is going to be really bad for you guys. Right.
Yeah. So some tribes have treaties that say that they have a right to fish, and they have a right, in some cases, they have a right to fish on their reservation. And in many cases that was taken away when they built some of these dams. Right. So, Coeur d'Alene, I think, and some of the other tribes up there, they had a right to fish in the Upper Columbia. And then when they built Chief Joseph and Grand Coulee dams, those fish are gone. And I think I've heard the chairman up there talk about just the emotion of once they're gone, you don't really get them back. We get our fish out of a truck now. And that is not the same as what they used to do. They used to go to Kettle Falls, like one of the oldest inhabited places anywhere in the world, anywhere in North America for sure. 15,000 years at least people lived there for. And they can't do that anymore. Kettle Falls is underwater. But they went there to take salmon year round, and that is what they did. Same thing at Celilo, same thing at various falls here in southern Idaho too. And so some of the tribes here may not have that right to fish in the same way that those treaty tribes do, but that doesn't mean that they're any less important, right?
What, if I may ask, what happened? Why is Kettle Falls underwater?
It was dammed by Grand Coulee Dam and by other dams that were built on the Spokane River as well. And same thing with Celilo Falls. Celilo Falls was actually the longest continuously inhabited place anywhere in North America. Like I said, 15,000 years. Celilo Falls is underwater because of the Dalles Dam. And so the village that was built there, the marketplace that fed hundreds of tribes, not just from the Northwest, but from, all across the entire West, people would come there to trade for salmon, to trade for obsidian, to trade buffalo hides, to trade whatever else it might be. That is all gone. And so, pointedly, I say it was the longest continuously inhabited place because you can't live there anymore. There is no more. Well, Celilo is underwater.
Yeah. So when those treaties disappeared, do these tribes have any contemporary claims then?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we've seen, I think, really strong tribal efforts to, get what they feel what they feel they were promised, what they reserved for themselves, right? And so, like, this is not a tribe saying, this is not the U.S. government promising salmon to a tribe. This is a tribe saying, we have always had salmon and we're going to keep salmon. And that is both of our responsibility to uphold this covenant between us so that we can uphold our covenant with salmon. That's an old cultural story in sure. Many tribal histories is that they have a deal with salmon, that they will take care of each other. Salmon will feed men, people, humans, and humans will take care of salmon in return. And so if tribes can't do that, and I should say I'm not tribal, this is not my story, but this is something fundamental to their cultures, their religions, their diets, everything like that. And so once you take that away, that's just a gaping hole in the middle of tribal practices and tribal culture. And especially, whether salmon are 100% gone or whether they are on the ropes, like most of our salmon are here in the Northwest. that's just heartbreaking, right? And so that's a lot of why I do this work, for sure, is to uphold my own government's covenant with these people, right? And to fight for that as much as I can.
That's a lot, man. That's a lot.
It's heavy stuff, right? And like, it's easy to sit around here and say like, oh, energy is important, dams are important, agriculture is important. Those are all true, but something about salmon, steelhead, lamprey, another wild fish, and tribal culture just cuts deeper than any of that to me. And the importance of those species to those people is just like, it's another thing that's at the center of the Northwest, and at the center of like one of the solemn promises that our government has made to these other people, what were considered at the time sort of foreign states or foreign nations, right? And so there's just, that is the law of the land. That underlies the entire Constitution, right?
Right.
Like our promises made to other countries, these tribes as well, tribal nations. And so that's...
One other thing I wanted to ask about, and again,
Sure.
I know I've had you in here for a bit, but one big thing that I wanted to ask about is Norm brought up the Lewiston port, right? And he's like, look, this is the most inland seaport in the United States. It's like, okay, awesome. Is that a good thing? Right? Like, I don't know anything about seaports. I don't know anything about, goods, transportation. I do know that we are not the most inland place in the country.
Sure.
Right? So if you travel more east, you got Montana, you got Wyoming, you got Chicago. It's like, Chicago does not have a seaport. How do they get the goods from sea? Like, do they get goods from China? Is that a thing?
Sure.
And like, what is the demonstrable benefit that having, quote, the most inland seaport give us and Lewiston? Like, how many jobs does it produce? Like, what benefit does it give the state?
So, one main thing is very little is shipped up on the Snake River. There's not a whole lot coming into Lewiston or the Lewiston area from the ocean.
Okay, great. So it's not really goods coming up.
It's fertilizer components, chemicals.
Okay.
That's kind of the main one going to this, a couple of companies, but the main one is McGregor Company. And that's
now, look, I like fertilizer. Like, don't get me wrong, but that's not like, oh yeah, without this we wouldn't.
Well, the biggest framing question, the biggest framing statement for all of this is that the dams haven't always been there, right? Farmers have been in that area for a lot longer than the dams have been there, and so before those dams got built, they used roads and trains to get all their product in and out, right? And so,
well, this is what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so it's essentially transporting agricultural goods. Okay,
right.
So we're exporting. We're not bringing things up. We're sending things down. Okay, great. How do people that don't have access to a seaport do that?
They put it on a train or a truck.
Okay, and is the seaport like, okay, so you have these two things. Now, are all the people that are training it or trucking it, are they like, God, I wish I had a seaport, like that would be the best? Is there a sentiment that it's like, oh, but it's this huge boom for these people?
I think if you have the opportunity to add more modes of transportation, nobody's going to say that's a bad thing, right? Especially if it's federally subsidized. There's no fee to go through any of these dams that are on the Columbia or the Snake River. And so, of course, that's a cheap way of doing that. If you don't have to pay for any of the upkeep or maintenance that happens on these dams, you pay for the gas basically and the cost of the barge going downriver, but there's no cost for actually going through these locks that are at each one of the dams, right?
And the barge would all be impossible without the dams, right?
Yeah, there's some old stories I've seen of like stern wheelers and other sort of old boats that are not barge sized moving through the lower Snake River even without dams. I think the safety of that is questionable, and also the economics would probably not pencil out. You're going with a way smaller vessel, probably burning just as much fuel. It's not a realistic idea to assume.
What's a stern wheeler?
Like, think of one of those old, the Mississippi River paddle boats with the big wheel on the back. That's a stern wheeler.
Oh, that'd be wild.
Yeah,
big
think like Mark Twain.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Exactly.
That's great. Or what is that? Come on, what's that show about? The lakes in the middle of nowhere, the gangsters, Mexican cartel, drug money.
I got Narcos?
No, in the lakes in like the Dakotas or something. Come on, you're gonna know it the second it comes to me. What's he and his wife? He was like laundering money for the drug cartel.
I got nothing. Usually things ring a bell in my head. This rings no bells.
You're gonna know it the second it comes.
I probably will.
We're probably gonna call the episode and then it's gonna come to me anyway.
So anyway, like that. that mode of transportation is helpful. I don't want to say, like, we built these dams for a reason, right? And that reason is, it was at the time legit, and it still does provide farmers up there with something. But I think what I hear all too often is these farmers saying, well, I can't do it another way. Like, I absolutely, the transportation system cannot work in another way. If the dams go away, my farm is going to go belly up. And I just don't agree with that, right? Like, we've seen other...
Well, hang on,
yeah.
if I may.
Sure.
Let's put our position generously with, if the farmer says, hey, I'm not going to have the money if this thing goes away, they know their financials best. Okay, let's just hold that.
Yeah.
Okay. But we also have to say that's fine, but there's an inherent cost then to your business model, right? There's an inherent cost that we all have to tolerate. Like, if my business model only works if I have free intern labor,
right, then
I don't really have a good business model.
Yeah.
Right. And I would just describe whatever crummy business models. Like, if I don't have free labor, I don't make money. It's like, well, then you're not really in a business. You're in like a charity, right? So if people are saying, hey, look, my business model is predicated on having this thing that, by the way, costs people, money, then it's like, okay, well, we should take that into consideration. Right. Like, because the other farmers don't get that.
Totally. Right. And to be fair, they built their lives and livelihoods and everything they're doing farming around the idea that this barge and dam system was going to be there. Right. And if that's no longer there, and if the new train transportation system costs a bunch of money to install or to fix up or a bunch of money to operate, then we need to handle those costs, right? Like, this is if we're doing all of this to end the salmon wars, to end the litigation battle that's been going on for 25, 30 years at this point, and all in an effort to restore salmon, stop paying for their recovery to the tune of, like you said at the start, $900 million a year eventually, once we get them recovered to these abundant populations, then we need to invest some money somewhere else, right? And I think we can save that, get the economics from salmon back, and still keep the agricultural economy and, other bits of the economy up in Lewiston intact, and maybe even improve them, to be honest.
Gotcha.
While getting a big recreational economy out of Lewiston too. Lewiston changes in this scenario, right? Lewiston changes when the dams go away from flat water recreation to something different, a whitewater recreation area that Washington as a state and that corner of the state of Idaho doesn't really have right now. Like, we have the Middle Fork, we have the Grand Canyon down in Arizona. This is another thing kind of like that at the same scale, 140 miles of free-flowing river with something like 70 or 80 named rapids under those reservoirs somewhere. Like,
Gotcha.
that's a 5 or 6 day trip that people can start taking if they want to, while still being able to operate jet boats on the river and also run a train line right down the side of the river, because that train line exists right now.
Yeah, and to be really clear on this one, when you take into account, it's like, okay, these other farmers don't get this, right? It's very similar in my mind to what happened with the alcohol licensing, which is essentially people would buy businesses based on having a very one of the very few liquor licenses within a particular area, and they would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to these businesses and the liquor license that came with it. And then obviously the state looks at the liquor license like, well, we're growing, like we should give out more liquor licenses or something. We should revise this. And the people that had purchased the businesses were like, whoa. I spent, $300,000 to get this, right, and you're about to do something that's going to grossly devalue this. So if we're talking about ag in an area that would be affected by the barge system, I could 1,000% understand people saying, whoa,
right,
like, we bought this farm, or my great grandfather bought this farm. This is how we have a business model, and this is how we survive. And you're just saying, change your business model. Like, I could, right, I mean, I would like kick my own ass out of the building. So like, yeah. I totally get that. And so again, this is kind of like the incumbency problem, right? This is the way people have been doing it. Mm-hmm. And when you start messing with people's livelihood and their capacity to operate and just move through the world in the way that they have, that's a really, really difficult conversation to have. And understandably, like, nobody's going to want that.
Right.
Right.
Right. And so, what I spend my time doing is trying to build trust, right? Everybody knows what I want, which is I want abundant fish. And I think scientifically that the only way we can do that at this point, because we've tried everything else, is to breach these 4 dams and get more fish back here into the state of Idaho. That's going to mean change for those people, but I don't want it to be devastating for those people, right? I'm dedicated to solutions just like Congressman Simpson was back in 2021 and still is, I will say. Like, I want solutions where everybody wins. We currently have this system where one side has been winning, and they've been winning since the 1950s when they first started building these dams, and those are the people who benefit from them most. Utilities, farmers, barge companies, anybody else who likes this sort of flat water system that we've developed here in the region. The people who are losing are the fish themselves, the tribes that depend on them, and anybody who likes fishing for them, including these river communities like Reagan, Salmon, Stanley, wherever else you might want to think of. And so we're living in this world where some people are winning and some people are losing. What if we can all be winners? What if we can all come out of this and have everything that we want out of this system? Like, farmers can still have reliable, affordable transportation. Utilities can still get reliable, affordable energy. And people can still have access to abundant fish such that people can actually enjoy them, right? Like, I didn't grow up here in Idaho. I grew up in Oregon. And when I hear all these stories of like thousands or 100,000s or millions of fish coming back to Idaho, like the abundance that used to be here, it's incomprehensible. And so when I go to a place like the Middle Fork of the Salmon or Marsh Creek or Clearwater, I might see a fish, but it's like a rarity. It's an oddity. It's something that I come home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I saw fish.
Yeah.
And that's like, it makes my weekend, right? Might make my whole summer if I see a couple of fish spawning up on Marsh Creek or something. And it doesn't have to be that way. It certainly wasn't always that way. And we can get it back such that everybody here in the state can realize this wealth, this bounty that we once had, that we can have back, and everybody can interact with that. And we can be sort of the salmon river state again that I think we used to be.
Man, that's a lot. There's so many moving pieces here, and so many, just so many things. And again, one of the biggest things I think from this is, look, hydropower can be a great thing, and we can rely on hydropower, but that doesn't mean that anything that produces hydropower is, as valuable as the next. It's like you have the most valuable, the highest ROI hydropower project, and then the least, right? And then a bunch in between those, and God bless them all, right? But at some point they're, in pursuit of a potentially better balance for everybody, as you're saying. Like, can we get more people winning? Maybe we start looking at like, okay, what's the least effective and worst operating, hydro operation in the state? Mm-hmm. And is that penciling out? And is there any benefit of addressing that or trying to replace it with something else?
And I think, throughout the rest of the region, we've found pieces like that, right? Like those dams on the Owa that I was talking about before, they weren't producing anything. They were blocking salmon habitat entirely. And the company that owned them wanted them gone. And so, over several years, they facilitated getting rid of those dams, but it was still a long process for people to agree with that and to get that through Congress. Same thing with the Klamath. They just took out 4 dams over the last couple of years down there that the company, Pacificor, wanted gone. They didn't want anything to do with them. They didn't want to have to put in fish patches over them as a requirement. And so, it just took a long time to get people to detach themselves from the mystique of hydropower and the mystique of this development of rivers here in the Northwest, and this sort of like, I guess I'll call it like a taming of nature. And I think it's a mature thing to say, hey, we made this decision to dam this river a long time ago. We are rethinking that. We have different priorities now than we used to. The economics aren't the same as they used to. The situation isn't the same as it used to be. And so we're going to make a different choice now. We're going to recognize that even if that wasn't a mistake at the time, that it's a mistake to keep those dams in place now. Mm. And that's what I'm looking for when we go to this next, what would be the biggest river restoration in the history of the world when we take these dams out.
Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming and explaining this. Obviously, there's so much that's wrapped up into this, and it's just really complex. And again, I love hearing about every side of it, because you have considerations for all people. And again, Norm, as somebody who used to represent water users, a beautiful articulation of, look, these are the problems that we're experiencing. And he's very much on, like, team, let's get the most out of the water and let's benefit a lot of people. And, again, just like you're going to have better and worse hydro projects, it's like, I think everybody has a use for water, right? And then ultimately we as a community kind of decide what are the most valuable or greatest ROIs, you know, multi-use, single use, whatever it might be, for this scarce resource. Anyway, thank you for coming in, sir.
Of course.
I'm actually going on a water tour later this summer.
There you go.
Of East Idaho. Maybe you and I should connect afterwards.
We should.
That'd be great. Awesome, man. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, man.